And I'm ready whenever you're ready.
Okay. This House believes that undocumented students should be eligible for federal aid for higher education. The resolution before you today is about people's rights to equality in this country. We, the affirmative, contend that the only legal, moral, and fiscally responsible choice is to allow all persons residing in the country equal eligibility for federal aid for higher education, regardless of their legal status. By residing, we mean an attempt at gaining a permanent residence and having resided within this country for at least 3 years. By undocumented immigrant, we mean a foreign person born who resides in this country with an unknown legal status. And federal aid specifically means financial aid given to a person for the purpose of assisting in the funding of their higher education. A person residing in this country has the same rights as any citizen. The Supreme Court has ruled, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny of any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Applied to all persons without regard to any difference of race, of color, of nationality, and to an alien who has entered the country and has become subject in all respects to its jurisdiction and part of its population, although allegedly to be illegally here. In another case, the Supreme Court ruled that whatever his status under the immigration laws, an alien is a person in any ordinary sense of that term. The undocumented status of these children, Velnon, does not establish a sufficient rational basis for denying them benefits that the state affords other residents. Therefore, to deny federal aid to undocumented immigrants would unlawfully discriminate and violate our own Constitution. Morally, the affirmative is valuing justice and equality, an aspect that the negative cannot refute, by allowing undocumented immigrants the means to achieve an education just like a documented American student. The United States government would be providing a just and fair system. Let's pose this. Why should an undocumented person who has completed 12 years of school and has the aptitude and the ability to achieve a higher education, as well as an equal or greater financial need as a documented person, have to face additional hurdles after having already overcome more than the average documented person? Why does one deserve more opportunity for higher education than the other? The argument for this mindset would be precedence and legality, but this argument is solely based on circumstances often outside that person's control. No one has a choice where they are born, but one should have a choice to pursue higher education. Philosophically, one of contemporary philosopher John Rawls' theories on justice as fairness requires that citizens with the same talents and willingness to use them have the same educational and economic opportunities, regardless whether they were born rich or poor. In this way, Rawls argues that maximum justice as fairness is achieved. Aside from clearly being the only legal and moral option, the only fiscally responsible option is to remove the barriers preventing undocumented persons from qualifying for federal education based solely on their citizenship status. Failure to provide the same assistance to these students is denying this country's economy the ability to have a better educated worker pool, which can only benefit the economy and the country as a whole. Denying undocumented students college access perpetuates inequity and penalizes students for their parents' decision to immigrate to the United States. Studies have shown that the potential of revamping current legislation to allow undocumented students access to federal funding for higher education to have a huge expected positive monetary effect.
So you can stay up there and then.
Okay.
So then I go up there?
Yeah.
So according to Rolls and your evidence that you gave from him, how does denying a loan deny the ability to work?
Well, the same reason you're going to college, to get an education, to get you a better job, to support your family and our economy as a whole. It's the same for anyone.
So oftentimes they come into the country and they are actually unable to work based on their status. So how can going to college change the fact that they still may not have status as a legal resident in the United States?
Because an education can provide you with better employment and better knowledge and support system. And once you have those things behind you, then these people can become citizens that choose to be.
So they can become a citizen based on the amount of education they have?
No, they can become a citizen because they have been more indoctrinated into our society. They'll be a contributing member of society and choose to be a citizen.
Okay, so you mentioned that they have to overcome additional hurdles. Does this have any effect in us sympathizing for them, as in they should have the better opportunities that we have since we don't overcome these specific hurdles?
Do you not empathize for the underdog? Do you not realize that they have no choice but to learn a second language? Where you may choose to learn Spanish or Farsi, they have to learn to be productive citizens in our country, where the opportunities are.
Even though they're here illegally?
Well, children that are born don't necessarily choose that.
Okay, and
That's time.
okay, good. Oh wait, it is me, but I need my papers. Okay.
Can you see?
Yeah. Okay, that'll work.
Is that good?
Okay. All right. Undocumented students. We define this as a foreign national who entered the United States without inspection or fraudulent documents. And this House must function as a United States House of Representatives. We prefer this definition because the United States is specified in the definition for undocumented students as given by the National Immigration Law Center. So observation 1, the resolution calls for a general inclusion of undocumented students and not the inclusion of every undocumented student. The resolution does not call for federal government to give every form of financial aid, but rather specifically student loans. So your disadvantage for number 1 is there's no inherent barrier. The DREAM Act allows undocumented students to be able to obtain federal student loans, according to the National Association of Foreign Student Advisors. Though in-state tuition makes college more affordable, access to financial aid is also critical. The DREAM Act does not go as far as some would like in this area, but it makes student loans and work-study possible. It does not make Pell Grants and other types of federal aid possible, but states 4 are not limited in the type of financial aid they make available, opening other avenues for aid. Disadvantage 2, passing the resolution takes away from rights of the states and the legal citizens. A, giving undocumented students federal loans takes away states' rights. Laura Collins, 2014. The Constitution is silent on education, leaving those matters to the states. The federal government's involvement in higher education mostly is limited to federal student aid. Public colleges and universities fundamentally are an area of state concern. This is the beauty of federalism. States can enact policies that are optimal for their residents without burdening the rest of the United States, imposing a one-size-fits-all policy. A state that determines it is in its interest to offer undocumented students in-state tuition should not be precluded from doing so. B, federal student aid rewards students for bad behavior while taking away opportunities for legal citizens. National Conference of State Legislature, 2014. Allowing undocumented students to pay in-state tuition rates takes opportunities away from U.S. citizens and legal immigrants. Granting residents tuition towards undocumented students and their families for breaking the law, while at the same time punishes legal citizens and legal immigrants, by taking away enrollment slots for them. This means that it doesn't matter if the undocumented student knew if they were undocumented or not, because bad behavior from the families has to be taken into account as well. Disadvantage 3, education funding trades off with military funding. Hagel outlines budget reducing troop strength, force structure, 2014. Under a Pentagon budget that will shrink by more than $75 billion over the next 2 years, with deeper cuts expected if sequestration returns in fiscal year 2016, Hagel and other senior defense and military officials acknowledge that some of these budget choices will create additional risks in certain areas. Some of that risk is associated with a sharp drawdown of the size of the Army, which budget calls for reducing to as low as 440,000 active duty soldiers from the current 520,000. Hagel warned today that if the budget for the fiscal year of 2016 returns to steep automatic spending cuts, we're gambling that our military will not be able to respond to multiple major contingencies. B, funding for undocumented students in California under the California Dream Loan Program will be $3.6 million for the university and $1.5 million for California State University. If these costs were given for every public university, it would cost the United States over $2 billion a year to fund. This would easily bring the defense budget down to the point of reaching devastating impacts that come along with having a weak national security. Okay.
Time. And you can stay.
Oh, why? Oh, for questions.
Questions.
She asked me a question.
Okay.
I thought you asked me. Isn't it?
We had a mess up, so
Okay.
I'm doing forward stuff,
Okay.
which will be good because I didn't know that.
Joe.
Devin.
Devin. The non-J. Where are you? Devin. Got it. Okay.
Okay, first we just wanted to start off by asking, what was your first point? We missed your first point, we just wanted to clarify.
First disadvantage.
Your first disadvantage.
Okay, first disadvantage
Yes.
was there's no inherent barrier, currently meaning that undocumented students are currently able to receive federal student loans.
Okay, okay, thank you. And then, we had a couple questions on, well, your definition of undocumented students isn't as accurate. It's a person that has an unknown status, not undocumented. The federal constitution is silent of education. What did you mean by that? Like, are you aware that the federal Department of are you aware of the Federal Department of Education?
Yes, but the fact that the Constitution lists nothing about education for Americans.
Okay, okay. So what did you mean by, when you said, you spoke on the California University, you
Right.
said there's $3-point-something billion
Right.
budget. What did you mean by it would take away from other students being able to, like if we gave these undocumented students
Right.
this loan, what did you mean by it would take away from other students?
Well, those are actually two separate issues. The $3.6 million from the University of California and the California Dream Loan, that's a state issued funding, and the fact that they documented students are not having the same amount of slots, because say you bring in undocumented students and there's only 20 slots left and they're taking up 15, we're less likely to get a slot in, as well as the other money circulating around to get federal student loans ourselves.
Okay, well, what about the revenue that these students bring back going to school? You know what I'm saying? Like, they do take up these slots initially, but they also
That's
do
fine.
bring back money.
Oh.
Okay. Sorry.
Oh, it's you, buddy. It's you.
Is it me?
No,
Yeah.
it's me.
It was on
It's
there.
me.
I was about to say, I thought.
It's me.
I thought my comment.
I'm sorry. It's slow.
Alright.
Wait. It's Garrett. What?
Because
Negative
remember, you
attack.
switched- you
Negative
switched with
attack,
me.
5.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Oh, Garrett.
Alright.
Alright.
Sorry about the confusion.
It's alright, I'm still confused, I'm looking at it.
When I judged that debate at the high school, one of our boys' computer was literally masking tape together. And it's like,
Alright.
Alright, so before time starts, I'm just gonna go straight down the flow and look at the just exactly how they went down through their case and extend upon stuff in our case. Alright, and am I allowed to time myself?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, just 4 minutes?
4 minutes.
Okay. Alright. So starting off with their first observation, they talk about how this has to be like a people's rights and solely about the persons, but we know that this can't be the case because education is not an inherent right. You can look to a card that we have here talking about undocumented students. It was published on May 5th by the National Conference of State Legislation that says, due to the landmark of 1982 Plyer versus Doe U.S. Supreme Court decision, states are required to provide all students with the K-12 public education regardless of students' immigration status, although the courts did not declare education as a fundamental right. Also link back to our disadvantage, one card where it talks about in the first line of the states part where it says that since it's not talked about in the Constitution, then it has to go to the states first. Next, looking onto the definitions debate, they want to argue with the undocumented students debate that we have, but we have like the most reliable source, so prefer that definition because it comes from the Immigration Center, so like it's the most applicable to this time. Also, the financial aid definition, like this is a skewed argument. Resolutionally, we came in prepared to like debate about student loans, and then financial aid broadens that substantially to where it's abusive to the negative team, so don't buy that in today's round. In their advantages, they talked about like undocumented students have to have these same essential rights and like state of being that everyone else has, but they actually don't have any long-term benefits. So like there's no benefit to the country. In the Chamber of Commerce of the United States versus Whitling, we find out the Immigration Reform and Control Act make it unlawful for a person or other entity to hire or recruit or refer to fee for employment in the United States for any alien knowing the alien and undocumented student alien. So basically, like this is saying that once you get out of college, there's going to be nothing that you can do because you can't legally hire these people, so it's a waste of time anyway. So it's not saying like people can't work, and we'll get into that later. Also on the equality, go ahead and cross-apply our disadvantage A and B card for the state's rights and for the taking away legal immigrants' rights, and that also has economic benefits as well. And you can look to, and then finally looking to the John Rawls evidence. So they want to make a big deal about like people not being able to work, but before people go to college, they can still get jobs. They can get jobs not going to high school. And when they still have the right to go to college. It's just like, what is the most beneficial for the government to spend their money on? So this Rawls evidence, it's not even applicable to the round. Also, like this shows that we have to look at more factors than just like rights. We have to look at what is the most logically beneficial to the United States as a whole. Go ahead and extend. Add on an extra card for an economic harm. The DREAM Act should undocumented students receive financial aid for states and universities. October 2012. Students who who attend college in their state receive an in-state tuition because their family have been paying state taxes for years. Many undocumented workers do not pay payroll taxes because they're unpaid under the table. So like they have these rights to work, but a lot of the time there's no benefit coming back to the United States. So all this stuff is just moot and askew anyway. We can talk about giving rights all day, but like we're promoting, you can cross-apply the card talking about promoting bad behavior, and it's not just like if you don't know that you're an undocumented student, it doesn't matter because it promotes immigration for the families, there's harms as well. And with that, I am open to cross-examination.
Who does that one?
Joe, what?
Thank you, goodness. Please, especially me?
Yeah, Joe.
Okay, awesome. How you doing, Mr. Garrett?
I'm doing well.
Okay. Of course, you claim there's no inherent barrier to federal loans. Well, actually, there's a federal law against it. I think that's a barrier. I'm just maybe me.
Well, actually, with the DREAM Act, like, it gives them temporary citizenship, and that fulfills the student loans, although it doesn't give them, like, Pell Grants and things of that sort, so there's no inherent barrier.
Okay, so they don't get the loans and things that we do, so it's not a barrier.
Right, so the resolution doesn't call for every student or every, like, undocumented student to be able to get this. Rather, if we are able to do it through some, then we still meet the resolution, and there's no inherent barrier.
You say education is not an inherent right. Would you say that equality under the law is an inherent right?
Equality under the law, but these citizens aren't legal. So I don't even know where that argument's going.
Only equality under the law for those that you agree with.
Well, I mean, we have, like, rights to protest and do things, like, that's something that you have, and you have the right to move, you have the right to do all sorts of things if you don't like the laws, but, like, they're set up, so if you want to talk legal, like, you have to go by what the law says.
So it should go by Supreme Court decisions.
We can go by, like, I brought up some Supreme Court decisions. I mean, they're typically pretty good.
You also said there's no benefit to the country, but according to the National Immigration Law Center, they estimate that an average 30-year-old Mexican-American immigrant woman in the United States with a baccalaureate degree will pay $5,300 more in taxes each year compared to the same individual that has a high school diploma or less. Do you agree with that?
Would you say that one more time for me?
According to the National Immigration Law Center in 2004, they estimate that the average 30-year-old Mexican-American immigrant woman in the United States with a baccalaureate degree will pay
Right, so that's, like, not specific to illegal immigrants. Like, that could be anything. That could be legal immigrants. So
We're not talking about illegal immigrants, or
yes, we are. Like, undocumented students are people who are not
who
here
with an
legally.
unknown legal immigration status.
No, actually,
I don't know
we
your
show
legal immigration status at this time, but I'm not going to say you're illegal. I'm going to say you're undocumented.
right. Like, you have to look to our
Time.
definition. Thank you.
I don't like to debate you in a not so formal environment.
Okay, so Laura?
Yes.
Is that right? Okay.
These two right here, I didn't touch the bottom two paragraphs. Starting with B.
Oh, yeah, I wrote that in.
You got both of them?
I think so.
Take it with you, in case you don't.
Okay.
You can always reference the pages underneath it.
Should move the steps to up to.
It's hard to talk fast when your voice is all jacked up.
Okay, before I begin, I will just be going straight down the negatives case. Okay, just to begin, their observation one stating that it's a general inclusion of undocumented citizens. The resolution doesn't say a general inclusion, so therefore I think their observation one is completely abusive and a way just to get around the major point of the resolution. They also state that there's no inherent barrier under the DREAM Act. However, I want to make the clarification that the DREAM Act hasn't currently been passed, so any of their detriments, assuming the DREAM Act has been passed, should should just be thrown out. Their second one says it takes away rights and that the Constitution is silent when it comes to education. However, the federal government is not silent on discrimination, and in fact, they did give a Supreme Court case, which is under the federal government, that establishes the right of all immigrants to have a K through 12 public education. So therefore, that is the federal government actually making a decision on education and also making a decision on discrimination. It also states that it rewards bad behavior, but that's a completely asinine statement because getting an education is not bad behavior. You're not rewarding someone for bad behavior just because they want a higher education just like someone else. That's just, it's bad, it's pretty much just like semantics by saying like bad behavior. This is why that they should be, they should not have a higher education. A lot of the times the neg case stated that it's a waste of time, it's a waste of money. However, according to the Congressional Budget Office in 2010, it estimated that it would generate, the DREAM Act would generate $2.3 billion in revenue because it would decrease criminal justice and it would decrease welfare expenses, as well as people who get an education are more likely to have $5,300 more in taxes. And so with all that combined, that is $2.3 billion, and you should cross-reference that to their disadvantage 3 subpoint B when it said it would lose like $2 billion to fund. Well, that's already $2.3 billion, and it states in a net revenue.
And so that means everything going in and everything going out, you would still be making $2.3 billion by allowing immigrants to get an education. They also state in their third disadvantage that it trades off with the military budget by $75 billion, but they don't give like a percent of what this is like actually in the military budget, so it could be 1%, it could be 50%, but not knowing the percent actually means that you have no idea how much it would actually affect the military budget. They also state that it would decrease the troops, but it wouldn't even decrease the troops 100,000, and as of right now we are not in a war, and so I don't understand why the amount that is just in our Army matters, because we still have the Navy, we still have the Air Force, we still have the Marines that they don't actually even consider. So we don't actually know if we're losing personnel at all. And the fact that we're not in a war, of course it'll be like, there's always a chance we'll go to a war. However, there's always a chance that something could happen. Doesn't mean that we need, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of just infinite Army members. And so to go back in our case, once again, they state that education is not an inherent right. However, the Supreme Court has made a ruling that everyone has equal rights. And so under equal rights, everyone should be allowed federal loans. And federal loans and federal aid, I know this was like a distinction that the negative tried to make between federal loans and federal aid. However, federal aid just makes it more broad, and so it allows undocumented immigrants, once again, the same opportunities as a current legal resident. And for those reasons, I urge an ballot.
I'm so scared I'm gonna knock over this camera.
Sorry, I can pick it back up.
All right, so let's go ahead and start off with this information that you bring up about the DREAM Act. So, you say that hasn't been passed federally, but if it's been passed, it's been passed in California at the very least, doesn't that mean that, it's still in effect?
Well, I mean, it's still in effect 1 out of 50 states. So I'm saying that all your detriments that you're saying the DREAM Act has caused isn't at a national level. And we need to look at this resolution, as you stated, at a national level, because your house is the House of Representatives, not in California, but in the United States.
Right, so you never really addressed, the states' rights argument, so,
Yes,
doesn't that mean we have to...
Yes, I stated that the U.S. government has made, education decisions that the states had to enforce. So you were
saying, the Plyer versus Doe, that's the same evidence we used, and it talked about how this is not in it was proclaimed that they are able to go to high school, that's a right, but it's not, education is not an inherent right. So doesn't that make that moot?
Well, you just said getting a high school education is a right, but getting an education is not an inherent right. Do you understand how you're just playing with semantics at this point? You're just playing with word games.
Not really, because we also gave you another source that showed you that it's not an inherent right.
And you also
hold on, let's go ahead and move on and look at the bad behavior argument. You said that getting education is not bad behavior, but that doesn't really address the family argument.
Okay, but as we addressed the family argument earlier, saying that your circumstance, a child's circumstance, they're not in charge of.
Right, the family is the one who brings them there. That's what promotes more immigration. So more families will bring their children because they know that their children can gain these rights.
You're making it seem like this is the most evil thing. Oh my God, my child can get a right to an education. Let me not move to America.
If we want to look at moral arguments and stuff, what are we gonna do with law breaking?
Well, as I stated before, the DREAM Act would decrease criminal,
let's go ahead and move on to the military argument. You said that, we don't... Thank you. Just leave it there.
Negative, or probably defense.
Number 9. Number 9.
See her initial. All right. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, first of all, they tried to make several points that were basically strawman arguments, the fact that, denying a person the right to an education is not the same as denying them the right to work. Well, that is indeed true, but we're not arguing about the right to work. What we're arguing about is the fact that an education will allow an immigrant the ability to break the cycle of poverty that is inherent to the lack of job skills and a higher education. So you're not against them working as long as they don't work anything more than a menial job. It sounds pretty racist to me. As long as the idea that equality does not apply because education isn't mentioned in the Constitution. Well, equality is mentioned in the Constitution. And the laws that the Supreme Court has ruled on this are several, among which Wong Wing, as well as Potter v. Doe and Yikwo v. Hopkins. And they state that, as we stated before, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, and property without due process of the law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction, it does not say citizen, any person within its jurisdiction, the equal protection of the law. And these provisions, and I'm quoting from the Supreme Court decision, are universal in their application to all persons within the territorial jurisdiction without regard to any differences of race, color, nationality, and the equal protection of laws is a pledge of the protection of equal laws. And I can go on to it with that. Another Supreme Court decision said that these apply without regard to any differences of race, color, or nationality, and to an alien who has entered the country and has become subject in all respects to its jurisdiction and a part of its population, though alleged to be illegally here. So the Supreme Court and the federal government does control education. The Federal Dream Act has not been passed, and the California Dream Act, which you mentioned, does not apply to this argument in any way, shape, or form because it only applies to state loans, not federal loans, because California cannot control the federal government, thank goodness. And regardless, the federal government has ruled that if a state is going to give anything to a citizen, then the federal they have to give it to a non-citizen as well. Otherwise, it's simply not equal. And the idea that it's going to cost us something as far as our military budget is concerned, you have to take into account that the military budget for the U.S. is currently higher than the combination of all militaries across the world. So if you think that taking away a few million, a few billion, or even a couple trillion is going to make even a significant dent in the military budget, you're sadly deceiving yourself. You must have failed economics. Okay. Now, undocumented immigrants are on average in a higher need of financial aid. This has been shown and proven. 39% of undocumented children live below the federal poverty level compared to 17% of native-born children. So if you think that taking away their ability to get aid from the federal government is not a barrier, I'm afraid you're sadly mistaken. And that's all I got.
Still have a minute.
You what?
You still have a minute.
A minute?
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, legally, the Supreme Court has already ruled on this, that it's illegal to not give these people the same benefits that is given to any citizen. And morally, the idea that you're not going to allow someone to have the same access to something just because you don't like them, that's immoral. And fiscally, we've already shown that not only do they have a greater need for higher education benefits, but they also will be able to contribute to the system with a higher education far more than they would otherwise. It allows them to break their cycle of poverty, and we've shown that it will bring in more in taxes in the long run than not giving them access to an education.
Good. That's time.
There you go. Sorry, I feel like crap.
Hey, me too, man. Had an asthma sucks. Okay.
There's no question.
No questions.
We're
to-
That wasn't the
No.
fence.
Yeah.
JJ. Right.
Yes, that's me.
Yes.
So everyone, hope everybody's having a good day so far. I'm trying to get this. I'm starting. Okay, we're talking about undocumented loans, of course, and listening to them. One thing they dropped was not inheriting rights. We didn't say that. I've seen also the school's negative research was as we worked vendors originally resolution, we dropped that, so we won that also. And then undocumented state loans is not long term, so they dropped on that also. But one thing she did mention when she was talking about K through 12 education, as specifically K through 12, she didn't actually mention the fact that the undocumented students a lot of them would go on with their higher education. And also through rewarding bad behavior, in the DREAM Act, they're talking about good moral character, like for undocumented students to receive these loans or anything like that. I don't know what a good moral character has to do with anything like that. Also, she also mentioned everyone has equal rights. Not necessarily everyone has equal rights because they are still considered undocumented students. And if you do give these undocumented students loans, then it could cause a problem, anything like that. Also, not every student will receive these loans, as it was dropped on that. And specific student loans mainly, like they were saying, they won't be able to get all loans anyway, so what is the point of, letting them receive loans, period, because they're not receiving the full financial aid. Also, discrimination. Nobody ever said that we are discriminating against undocumented students, because if that was the case, then it goes on right now, because not everybody in America is undocumented. We have different races, so that doesn't make sense when you say it's discrimination towards undocumented students when there are Mexican Americans in America that are legal that receive loans. So, yeah. And getting education is not bad behavior in tax revenue. Back on the subject of education with the military. Education and military, of course, it's a different type of thing, but you should not just put that in the same category of undocumented students receiving loans, because the military is a different subject when it comes to that. Also, with the state loans, parents who put their child through college or anything like that, who have been working towards trying to get them to get these loans, get them to receive this financial aid. It's hard for them, to see their child not be able to go to college, and they have to worry about if an undocumented student gets to receive loans, because even when their parents have not been are not legal citizens, and they are considered not legal citizens also. And that's basically what we have for the speech, the defense speech, and
that is time.
How is everybody?
Great.
Kevin.
Definitely. Well, I just wanted to start by saying thank you for this time. We wanted to just go over a couple of things just to conclude and just to summarize. We just wanted to pound it in there that we believe that all students, undocumented or not, should be eligible for these, what am I going to say, financial aid for higher education. And that is coming solely off the basis that laws, with constitutional laws, say in any persons within their jurisdiction should be eligible for these grants and aid. So we just wanted to clarify, this is people's right. This is moral, legal, and fiscal responsibility for these people. Any person residing in this country has some rights, and to deny that federal aid would be unlawful, going against the Constitution, as we have said. The circumstances, we just wanted to say this again, the circumstances that the students are put into isn't by their own doing. I don't know many friends of mine that have been able to get their own education. No, I'm sorry, I'm just gonna cut that one off. To go against a couple things they said and to prove why we have won this debate is they use a ton of information about the DREAM Act, which again has not been passed except in one state, which is California, and 1 out of 50, first of all, isn't progress. Second of all, you can't add that information to this debate anyway because that is state information, that is state grants, state loans, state aid, and we're talking on the federal level, and they don't have, as Joe said, they don't have the responsibility, they don't have the right to control that. They said the DREAM Act allows students to, some students to gain this aid, but not all of them. Even in California, even if this was passed nationally, who has the right to say, oh, okay, these 15 students get it, but the next 45 are out. They're just so out of luck. I'm sorry. Just try again next year. Nobody should have that right to decide whether you get an education or not. We just wanted to make it known that denying loans doesn't deny work. That's what we said. We just wanted to pound that in there. But loans do make it easier to work. Loans give you that incentive. Loans give you that just kickstart kind of. And then they also made mention of there's no long-term benefit, so why give it to them anyway? They said education is a waste of time for these students. In all reality, there's a $2.3 billion net revenue that is added if this DREAM Act is passed, and so it is more beneficial to allow students access so that they can add to the economy after. The chances of getting an education or getting a job after their education is much higher than it is before they go to college. And again, this federal aid kickstarts that education for them. Ultimately, we just completely believe that laws should be protected, and that students, regardless of race, color, nationality, if they are in this jurisdiction, then they should be included in that law, and that they should all have the same equal opportunity to education and to that kickstart. Thank you.
I'd just like to thank both sides for the spirited debate. For the record, we love illegal immigrants. We love everybody. Not racist. So what I'm going to try to do here is consolidate all of the points made and then basically present to you why I believe that their arguments aren't as strong as they make them to seem. The very first thing that I'd like to start with is that nothing that we're doing here stops these undocumented students from receiving aid. All we're saying is that they should not receive federal financial aid. The thing that this side does not seem to understand is by us saying that does not mean that we're saying what our main argument is this is a state's issue more than a federal issue. The argument that he kept bringing by saying it was irrelevant that we said the DREAM Act was only passed in California, a point that we're trying to make is that immigration is not something that affects every single state in the United States of America. The reason we believe it should be state rights is the reason why California was the one that passed this, because California has some of the highest rate of undocumented students within residing in that sentence. And the reason we're saying this also infringes on states' rights is because we don't believe that all states should be forced to implement this. The 6 people that live in North Dakota should not be responsible for paying for the thousands of undocumented students that live in the state, again, like California. And when another argument that the affirmative does not seem to understand is when we're saying that this by granting this reinforces bad behavior. By bad behavior, we mean this increases more illegal immigration. When Ronald Reagan granted amnesty to all of the immigrants that were within the United States in that time period, even though he said that we will try to protect the border and secure it as much as possible, that caused a surge in illegal immigrants because they knew if they came to the United States that they could get granted amnesty, and that was the same thought process. That is what we mean by it reinforces bad behavior. By no means at any point in this speech did we say that we want to prevent people from getting an education. We're just saying this should not be on a federal level. This does not diminish their opportunity. And the fact of the matter is education is not an inherent right. It is not. nowhere in the Constitution does it state that everybody is granted a right to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and education. Education is something that the national government felt was important. That is why we do concede that they gave a K-12 education, but the right to a higher education is something that students that are even documented still have to fight for to this very day. And what we're saying is that in such scarce economic times, we don't feel that, first off, the United States even has enough revenue to provide federal aid for all of these students, because when we go back to the bad behavior arguments, the fact of the matter is that if we do this, more will come, based on the premise that the children will be allotted these federal benefits. That's the reason we're saying this should be left to the states. Also, the argument that we don't like, we were either racist or we don't like, undocumented students is just asinine. It really makes no sense, because what we're trying to do is we believe that this is an argument of law, not just morality. And because we believe that morality is somewhat subject, it has to be subject to law. That is why laws are in place. And by that, and secondly, whenever the arguments were brought up about the Constitution, how this should be effective to all peoples. The fact of the matter is, no matter how much you want to extrapolate from the Constitution was made for Americans, for legal Americans, legal citizens. That is why because the Constitution applies to citizens. This is something that should apply to American. This is something that applies to American citizens, and we don't just feel that if you extrapolate or you look at the Constitution in some wayward way, that we can just expand this to everybody. The greatest thing is that we believe that if we leave this, if this isn't a federal issue, that it can still be left up to the states. The current system is that undocumented students are still afforded loans, but they're just not afforded financial aid, such as the Pell Grant. Thing is, the Pell Grant is just basically, for lack of better words, free money that the federal government gives to students. That is the only thing that is being denied to them, but we still believe that this is an issue that states can still provide, because this does not affect every single state. Okay, and
Slide.
oh wow. Thank you.
Oh, no. Done.
We all want a judgment call regardless.
We